welcome to my podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon, and I am a relationship expert, international speaker, and best-selling author of a book, Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news or on social media, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, or go through, as opposed to creating expectation of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything that's being said by my guest, but it is their chance to express their opinion and their stories. And here today, we are going to talk about the twists and turns of a relationship journey, because we often watch TV and see all the fairy tales and everything that just falls into place, but sometimes it's not quite that way. And here to talk to us about it today is Holly. Hi, Holly.
Hi, Sophie. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thanks for being my guest. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes. So I am 46 years old, and I grew up in the Northeast, and I worked in education for a long time before becoming a matchmaker.
Okay. So when you were younger, what was your idea of love?
I would say the fairy tale.
Yeah, I know, same here. I just said that about Cinderella and blah, 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 but it is, isn't it? You grew up as a little girl and that's what you think is going to happen.
Yes, and it wasn't as if I saw that around me or anything. However, that's what I hoped for, the romance, somebody who is going to sweep you off your feet and just fall in love and there would be no problems.
And what happened?
So I thought I met my prince, and that was early in life. It was my freshman year of college, and he actually fell in love pretty hard first. I can remember the day first seeing him. He was sitting in a class, in a college class, and I was waiting to go into mine, and he was staring like a little bit creepy at me. He wouldn't stop staring. And it wasn't until a few days later that I met him at a sorority function, and he came up to me and asked me on a date. And I later on realized that was the creepy guy that was staring at me. So maybe for him it was love at first sight. I don't know.
And so what happens next? Because you got married, didn't you?
Yes.
Was it quick?
It was quick. He fell hard, fast, and it took me quite a bit longer to fall. And we were interesting story. So I was a freshman, he was a junior, and he actually halfway through the year ended up losing his scholarship and had to go home.
Okay.
And we were going to break up, but we ended up missing each other too much. So we carried on and we did the long distance thing. And then over the summer, we moved up to the Northeast to be together and live together even. And
so how long had you been together at that point?
So that was at 6 months is when he proposed.
Oh, blimey. So he was quick.
Yes, he was quick. So I was 19 at that point. And I actually, when he asked, I actually said, let me think about it. And I let him know 2 weeks later that I would marry him. And
then what happened? Was it very traditional, got married, carried on studying, got jobs?
So we actually didn't get married until about 5 years later after we both graduated from college. So I was 24 when I got married. We've been together for almost 6 years at that point. We had a beautiful wedding, and everybody's saying, oh my gosh, they're so in love, and
so the fairy tale that you wanted, in essence.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say we were best friends. Like we had that best friendship. We were intellectually compatible. He was wonderful at compliments, and my love language is words of affirmation. So that was fulfilled. We had fun together. We had our moments, of course, like anybody.
But that's normal. That's real life, isn't it?
Yes. I would say his love language was physical touch for sure. Plus, later on, realizing a little bit of codependency there. So he did rely on me for more than I really.
Actually, do you want to tell people what love languages are, because they may not know?
Right. Okay. So Gary Chapman wrote this great book, The Five Languages of Love, and physical touch is one of them. So with the love languages, it's basically how you want to be loved, like where you feel loved the most. And typically the way you want it is the way you give it.
Yeah.
So somebody who is a physical touch person is going to want to hug you and want to, be intimate a lot. And then there's words of affirmation. So people need to hear the words, I love you, or you're beautiful, or whatever it may be. There's quality time. So needing time together. Some people can go months and or have that long distance relationship and be okay, but there are others who need to know when they're going to see you next and have time together. There's acts of service. So cooking you dinner or washing your car, that might mean more to somebody. And then the last one is gifts. So somebody who you might, buy jewelry for or something and they need that. So typically people have two main love languages. And when your love languages are drastically different, or say, for instance, your love language is physical touch and your partner puts that fifth on the list, it's going to be a challenge to. And a lot of times people don't recognize what their love language is or what they're doing. So if you're giving love the way you want to receive it and the other person needs it in a different way.
You don't feel loved where they're just showing in a different manner.
It gets missed. Yes, exactly. So it's really important to understand those things.
So going back to your story, so you're now married.
So we're married and we worked together in the same environment for a little bit. And then I went off to teach high school and we both started working on our graduate degrees. So we were doing that busy, but, still in love. We waited a long time to have children. I was 31 when I had my first child. And at that point, we made a lot of changes in 1 year. I got pregnant. I had daughter, and we moved. So we moved from the Northeast down to Florida. And in that move, he changed jobs, and I actually left my job because I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. So there was a lot of changes going on. And those changes turned into some pretty, it changed the entire relationship and what happened to us.
So do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. So when we got down here, I think he had a really hard time adjusting to the change, and he thought maybe he was depressed, and he said, I need antidepressants. And so he went to the doctor and was prescribed, but he was supposed to see a counselor in correlation with that. However, he never did do the counseling initially. So he was taking the meds, and not really knowing what they were doing to him, if they were even working. And kind of some of the behaviors that started happening, I know now were indicating that the medicine was not right for him. So what was once somebody I trusted with my life never had an issue of trust or wondering if he would cheat on me or anything like that. When my daughter was about 9 months old, I walked in on him looking at pornography. And I know that to some that's normal, but for us, I had never seen him look at pornography. And so it was a bit shocking. And he told me that, a friend sent me this, and he made up a story that I initially believed. However, my gut was telling me something different. So the next day, when he was working, I went in and opened up his computer, and I found a whole nother life. A whole nother life. Yes. People he had been talking with and sharing pictures and buying pictures and things like that. And it rocked my world. I mean, I never, ever expected it. I knew that he, was going through a change and the depression and everything. I knew that he was struggling with, not that he wasn't a great dad, but now he had somebody to share my attention with. It was difficult for him. So he was looking outside of our relationship to fulfill that.
And funny enough, that's actually a very common thing when the child is born, the man often feels left out and literally bottom of a pile.
Yeah, and I was breastfeeding all the time, and my daughter was pretty needy, and yes, definitely. And when we eventually did do counseling, we learned that a lot of what happened triggered him back to his own childhood and when his parents divorced and how he felt disregarded.
Yeah. And obviously you then found that he had affairs as well as the pornography.
Yeah, in terms of, actually he did go to meet somebody. Initially he told me that these were just online affairs. He was buying pictures of women and sending them gifts, but he did actually fly out, made up a story that he was going on a business trip. He flew out to California to meet somebody and spent the day and night and bought her all sorts of things.
So how did you feel when you find that out? From, like, you know, the Prince Charming on the white horse, as it were, to now this?
Shocked, betrayed, absolutely, like I wanted to leave. There was no way that I would stay after somebody did that to me. But he convinced me to go to counseling. Yeah. And I had never been to counseling in my life. And so to kind of hear a different perspective on why this was happening and what happened, and actually he became so vulnerable in that moment. And I think prior to that, he was way more of a pleaser. So he would say the things he knew I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And now he was being very, very raw with his feelings and emotions. And it actually made me more attracted to him, ironically enough.
I suppose it's also that nurturing, motherly, you know, rescuing kind of side that all of a sudden wants to grab and hug him and make it all better.
Oh, absolutely. And because I have this great deal of empathy, I felt like, yeah, I needed to fix him. And I felt responsible for some of the things. I mean, even though I had a newborn, some of it was just lacking the physical. But at the same time, when we were going through the counseling, he was pretty upfront about wanting to kill himself at that point, especially if I left. So it was this sort of a bit of feeling a little trapped, like I had to keep him alive and stay. I couldn't, even if I had the thought in my head that I might want to leave, I couldn't tell him because there was this fear that he would do something.
And do you think that was just blackmail on his part, or at that point?
I would say yes. I mean, later on with other things that happened, the doctors kept telling me, you know, he's just using you to, what's the word? You're just enabling him with this. Yes.
So what happened after that?
So interestingly enough, we, through counseling and trying to get through all this, we became very, very intimate. And actually I got pregnant again. And before I got pregnant, I really was considering leaving and figuring out a plan to leave. But when I got pregnant, I thought, this is the sign that I'm supposed to forgive and make it work. That was my answer that I'd been searching for, or so I thought.
So you thought, yeah. And what happened after that?
So being pregnant was not easy because when you're betrayed and you know your husband is looking at other women, to then get pregnant and look, you know, gain weight and all that comes with it was very difficult. But so there were moments where it was very hard and I was very vulnerable. But we got through it, and I actually grew to trust him again. For the most part. I honestly did not feel like that would repeat itself. And 6 weeks after my son was born, I found that he was doing the same thing again.
How did you feel when you found that out? Was that, right, that's it? Or was it just like, oh my God, I've fallen for it again sort of thing? Or just disbelief that he could be doing it?
All of the above. I mean, I definitely knew at that point that that was it. But I also started feeling like there's something really wrong with him. He is addicted to pornography. This medicine that he's on, this isn't the person I knew. This is completely different. So,
because there was some drinking as well, wasn't there?
There was a lot of drinking and mixing the alcohol with the medicine and staying out late. He didn't even basically I had a lot of friends in the relationship and he wanted to spend his time with me. He didn't really want to go out with friends. And now he was staying out late, not coming back till 3 a.m. Things like that were crazy behaviors that I hadn't experienced before.
So did you confront it?
Oh yeah. So at that point I said, okay, this is it. You know, we did live in a big house, so we were able to, I wrote up the divorce agreement right then. And luckily he agreed to everything I said. So he signed it. And we did have to sell our house, and we agreed to stay in the house with the kids until we got an offer, and we thought it would be fairly quickly in the market and everything. We lived in a big house, so I was able to stay in one section and he was able to stay in another. However, it went on for a couple months of not selling the house and being pretty scared what I would come home to if he would kill himself. And
because obviously these threats were still there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And one time his mom came to visit because she thought she could help us square everything away. And she was visiting in the house, and he came down to my room and he said, because we were pretty civil at that point, we weren't fighting or anything. I just had made my decision to go. And he came down to my room and he said, I need you to know that I was going to kill myself last night. I wrote the letter. And he was upstairs living where my kids were. And that point he told me he had a gun. And I've never even seen a gun close up in my entire life. So I went and let my mother-in-law know, and we made a plan to get the gun. So it was the craziest, surreal moment of my life. Okay, so she takes the gun because I don't even know what to do with it. And she tells me she finds a great hiding spot for it and not to worry because he won't get it. And the next morning, and we called the counselor and everything. The therapist was going to see him that day. And the next morning he called me on his way to work and he said, by the way, my mom's terrible at hiding things. I have the gun in the car. So there was that worry that, he would go off and do it then. And, but he was able to get to the therapist and give the gun over to the therapist at that point. And so that scared me enough to say, it doesn't matter if the house sells, I need to get my kids and myself to safety.
Yeah.
So we moved.
And then what did he say? What did he do?
He actually stayed in the house until it sold. And it was, he had several moments of just begging me to come back and being sad. But because at that point we had kind of discovered he had bipolar disorder, there were moments where he was completely guilty and still in love. And then there were moments where I was the devil and he hated me. So you never knew what you were going to get. And then he started dating somebody. He had a relationship with this woman, and after we sold the house, he was able to move into his own place. And so she was in his life and my kids met her and everything. And for a long time, I didn't know, I had not met her in person. And I just had this lovely image of her until I met her. And then I was like, whoa, this is because I just assumed he would pick somebody soft and nurturing and a little bit more similar to my character. And he went for the extreme opposite. And she was probably how he felt about himself at that time.
Yes. She
was very rough. She was into drugs and smoking and drinking heavily and just not a nice person. And when I met her, I said, oh my gosh, I can't even believe that I've had allowed my kids to be around this. The times with him, like the visitations got fewer and far between. He was not reliable to come see them or anything like that. There were a couple other times during then that he attempted to kill himself. One time I was on the phone with him and he just said, if I can't be with you, I don't want to live anymore. And I knew he was in that moment doing it. And so I got off the phone and called the police.
Mm-hmm.
Lived that out with them going to the house, trying to get in the house, and just barely saving him from that moment. But so that was
stress for you.
Stress, and I had a 1 and a 3-year-old at the time.
Yeah.
So, but yes, a year to the date, we got divorced. He killed himself.
Mm-hmm.
So he finally did. And before that moment, we had this wonderful conversation. And he actually said, I'm going to leave. And I got a job in London and I'm taking it. And I know you'll be great with the kids and so on and so forth. So I think he tried to just move away from it all. Mm-hmm. But in the end, he was too scared of like how to do it all. He wasn't himself anymore.
Yeah. And how did you feel at that point when you found out?
I kind of knew it was going to happen, but nothing can prepare you for the cops showing up at your house and telling you that. It was a moment I'll never forget. And the first thought I had was, what do I tell my children? Yeah. And it was about 2:30 in the morning. So I sat for a few, they got up early, they were little, but I sat for a few hours and just tried to think about how I would present that moment to them, because I knew it would shape the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm. So what did you do?
So I sat them on the couch and I said, I have some really sad news. I want you to know that Daddy's heart hurt so bad that God needed to take him away to make him better.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose because of her age as well, they kind of maybe understood that in their own way, sort of thing.
Yeah. That's what they understood at the time. And then as they got a little bit older, they translated that into he had a heart attack. I never said that specifically, but that's what they thought until later on they found out the truth.
And how do you feel now looking back on it?
I've been through a lot. In the beginning, I went into robotic mode because I had 2 little ones. I couldn't really feel everything that I was feeling. I had to block some of that. And I started racing and running and doing triathlons and just investing myself into just physically bettering myself. And so my grief took a lot longer than probably the normal person that takes the time to really just feel it. But I was trying to protect them and make their lives as good as I could. So while I thought I was focusing on me physically, emotionally, I really wasn't. I didn't take enough time to feel everything I had been through.
Yeah, and I think that the thing as well that, is an added difficulty to a degree is that obviously it wasn't even the person you married in the first place anymore, but you still loved him. And yes, you left, but it was to protect yourself. It was through various circumstances. So there must be that kind of like battle going on in your head at the same time.
The biggest battle I had was, what is the truth? This man told me for 15 years that I was the love of his life and he was the most grateful person on earth for that. And then in 1 year's time, the behaviors and what he did took all of that away. So I questioned, what was I? Like, what part of this is true? And after you can separate yourself from the situation and not personalize, you can recognize that, yeah, he was sick. And the man who I knew prior to that was really the truth. Yeah. Yeah.
And so how have you got on since then?
A lot of work on myself. I read all the time, but I'm now a lot better at just feeling what I'm feeling. Yeah. Not running from it. And literally running, because that's what I did. I would run all the time. So I allowed myself to just, I'll never forget, I was supposed to go out on a date one night and my time was very limited. Obviously, I didn't have anyone to take care of the kids but my parents. So when they did and I had time to, go on a date, I really cherished that time. And I can remember having one night where the date canceled on me at the last minute. And I sat alone. My kids were already at my mom's, and I sat alone and I cried. But it was this feeling of, okay, you cannot run anymore. You're not going to go out and distract yourself. You're going to sit here and you're going to feel it all.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I realized this hurts, this sucks, but I have to.
And I think this is a thing, a lot of people, we try not to face up to it because it hurts too much. But until you do and you stop running and you take it for what it is, you can't actually move on.
Absolutely. And, you know, we distract ourselves with things. We maybe overeat, or we drink, or we do drugs or whatever. And what I was doing, I didn't think I was distracting myself. I was doing healthy things, but I was. Yes.
And how has it been since that realization? So you've done the work, and what is the dating journey been like?
Yeah, so I feel like I took some people along with me on my journey, because that I had to figure it out along the way. So I did get into some long-term relationships. I even got engaged. But I don't think I was who I needed to be in that moment. And I ended up doing a little bit of running away from those relationships, or calling off the engagement. And I think now, I needed that time. Unfortunately, other people were affected, but I needed that time to figure out who I was and who I could be to somebody else. I mean, I feel at this moment, I am complete. I did do the work, and now I'm ready. So when it's time, because it has to be, the other person has to, timing. It's all about timing, right?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. So it makes sense why things didn't work out. I wasn't ready.
And to you, yeah, no, completely, I agree with that. And to you, what's a happy relationship, and what are you looking for?
A happy relationship is somebody that I can connect with on multiple levels. I am a deep thinker, so I need someone who can have a conversation with me. Emotionally, I need to feel safe and secure, and trust, huge. And I love to laugh. Laughter is everything. So someone who has a similar sense of humor and can keep up with the banter. I need that. And somebody with similar values. They need to understand, my family is very important to me. They're going to come first. And also someone who just appreciates and maybe has been through something similar, where they can take the tough lessons and appreciate life at a greater level because they've been through something so tough.
And I think, to be fair, I mean, some of us go through tougher things than others. But I think that, you get to a certain age where there is baggage, regardless of what it is, there just is, because it's very, very, very few people that can get through life and say that they didn't encounter that.
It's recognizing the things you do. We're all going to do things. We're all going to, what we're reacting to in the moment is not the moment. It's something from our past, typically, right? So it's recognizing why we're doing that and fixing it, or telling the person we're with, I know this doesn't sound rational, but this is why I'm doing it, or this is why I reacted that way.
And so would you say, to wrap this up, that you've got any regrets in life?
I really don't think so. I honestly feel like life is such a journey, and that it can't always be great. We have to have these difficult moments to make us who we are and to be better. So, and to become more self-aware.
And I think one of the things I often say to people is that, even at the depth of despair or at the height of joy, we need to remember that there's certain rules in the universe, and one of them is the wheel. A wheel goes down, it will go back up. It's just, the motion that it takes. There's no other way, so to speak. And we've got to remember that things can be bad and things can be really good, but we can't expect them to remain good all the time. But it's how equipped you are to deal with them and how you address the bad moments.
Oh, how you react to everything is everything, right? So everybody, you see some people with the toughest journeys out there, but they're the most optimistic, special people that are now giving back because they understand. And then people who haven't lived that life, who don't really know how to embrace it or appreciate the moment.
No, and they can't, because as you say, they've not had the experience to teach them that.
Yes. So I can't regret what happened to me, as tough as it was. And I'm sorry for my children, but I'm a completely different person because of it.
Mm-hmm. No, I can get that completely. Well, Holly, thank you so much for sharing your story, because obviously it's something very, very personal and very emotional. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so for everybody who listened, then if you enjoyed listening to something completely different that isn't the fairy tale that is being portrayed, and I think, there's so many people that go through various things and we just don't know what goes on quite literally behind closed doors. So if you enjoyed this, then I have more people with stories coming up. So please subscribe to the show, leave us a review, and more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you very much.